The Merchant's Daughter, Chapter 5, The Storm of Fear. Elora burst past the outer stone wall of the fence and the forever calming roses of her yard. The determination she had felt only a few minutes before were trying to be replaced by random thoughts of wolves and unseen shapes above her head. As she scurried up the stone walk, she looked up from her feet to the safety of her door. She gasped and stopped so suddenly she almost tripped. She wanted to scream, but held it back. In the darkness next to the house, but beyond the lantern's glow, something massive and dark appeared before her against the night sky. The shape towered, impossibly tall, its outline jagged and strange darkness against the sky. Dark forms jutted out at odd angles, like twisted limbs or stretched wings, making the figure seem both solid and shifting all at once. In the dim light, whatever it was seemed to ripple and move as if darkness itself had taken form and stood waiting on her doorstep. At that moment, all of Elora's earlier courage drained away. Her legs felt frozen on the stone path. Her breath caught in her throat. The shape was so unlike anything that should be there, so wrong in its stillness, that her mind couldn't make sense of what her eyes were seeing. Then the shape spoke. "Elora!" a familiar voice called out. "I am so sorry." She lifted the lantern higher, and the fearsome shape resolved itself into the kind-faced traveler she had helped just days before. Though her heart continued to race in her chest, her mind raced with relief, while her body felt tremors. "Oh, oh my, oh," she began to sob. "I'm so sorry I've frightened you, my dear friend. I'm so sorry," the weaver said softly. His voice was warm with regret, but he kept his distance, knowing that it might take her mind just a minute to realize that dark shadows are just real things. "I'm so sorry. I should have called out sooner, Elora. Darkness plays tricks on even the bravest hearts, doesn't it?" Elora took a deep breath and reached for her new friend. She shook for a moment while she calmed herself. "I have seen some amazing things tonight," she said in a half-whisper, half-croak. "Oh, let's go in by the warm fire." "Can you stay for a little while until I get my nerves back?" she sighed. He gestured to the door. Elora opened the door into the inviting warmth of her home. The embers of the hearth still glowed. She welcomed the heat and the emotional warmth. The weaver quickly moved to add more wood to the fire and blew on the embers until the fire burst into dancing flames. Already the discomfort of the chilly evening and the eventful evening were fading. After a few moments, the weaver spoke. "Your friend, this old weaver, has come to share some news that couldn't wait until morning. Though, perhaps," he added with a gentle smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes, "I could have found a less frightening way to deliver it." Both of them laughed. "Oh, I owe you a terrible fright," Elora gasped. "But maybe I'll find another time to share," she laughed. "Actually," the weaver said, settling into one of the chairs by the fire, "I think we both have stories that need telling." He pulled something from his pack. It was a leather-bound book with strange symbols etched into the cover. "But first, tell me what you found in the forest." Elora's hands still trembling slightly as she poured tea for them both. The familiar routine helped steady her nerves as she gathered her thoughts. "I found proof," she began, pulling out her father's notebook. "The wolves. It's definitely wolves. But there's something else," she hesitated, unsure how to explain what she'd seen in the clearing. The weaver leaned forward, his eyes bright with interest. "Something else?" "Perhaps something that left a perfect circle in the grass, or a mark like a giant wing. Elora nearly dropped her teacup. How did you know? Because, dear Elora, I'm not just a weaver of cloth. He opened his book, revealing pages filled with detailed drawings, creatures with scales and multiple sets of wings, some beautiful, some fearsome. I'm also a scholar of legendary creatures, and I believe what you've seen tonight is far more significant than wolf tracks. Thunder rumbled in the distance as the weaver shared tales of dragons from distant lands, not as monsters, but as ancient guardians of wisdom and protectors of the innocent. Stories of dragons who had saved entire villages from disaster, who had taught humans the secrets of healing and craft. But why are you telling me this now? Elora asked, fighting back exhaustion as she tried to understand. Because tomorrow morning, the village will gather. They'll be frightened, angry, ready to hunt what they don't understand. And you, Elora, are known and loved. You might be the only one who can help them see the truth. How did you know about the meeting? She asked. The weaver's smile was gentle, but knowing. The same way I knew to wait for you tonight. Sometimes wisdom comes to those who are ready to receive it. He stood, gathering his things. Rest for a few hours, dear friend. You'll need your strength for what's to come. Elora wanted to protest, but her body betrayed her. The powerful emotions of the night and hiking through the woods and the late hour exhausted her strength. The weaver was right. She needed rest. I must continue on my way, the weaver said quietly. Sleep now. I'll make sure the door is secure as I leave. As she settled onto the long, cushioned settee near the fire, she could have sworn she heard wing beats overhead, soft as a lullaby. Elora awoke to the bell began tolling in the village for the signal of an emergency meeting. Through a window, she could see people already hurrying toward the square. The sun was trying to break through gathering storm clouds, and the village square was already filling with people. Elora hurried to join them, the weaver's book of legends tucked safely in her satchel alongside her father's notebook of evidence. Ivan stood on the steps of the meeting hall, his face drawn with determination. Elora watched her childhood friend, remembering their shared adventures, climbing apple trees, chasing fireflies, exploring tide pools. But today was different. Today, Ivan stood taller, his voice carrying the weight of responsibility that seemed to have aged him overnight. Friends, neighbors, Ivan began, his words clear and measured despite the rising wind. We've all seen the signs, the broken fences, the scattered flocks, the strange sounds in the night. Something threatens our village, our homes, our families. His voice grew stronger with each word, and Elora noticed how the villagers leaned forward, drawn to his certainty. We live on the edge of the sea and the forest with strange and fearsome beasts, but we are not helpless. We must hunt down and protect ourselves from threats on the ground and especially in the air. Ivan's words rang across the square. We are the children of sailors and merchants, of people who face the fiercest storms of the White Sea. Whatever stalks our heels, whatever leaves those massive tracks, we will face it together, protect each other as we always have. Elora studied the faces around her. Mrs. Petrovna, clutching her shawl tight, Henrik's hand twisted in worry, the blacksmith holding his wife close. Everyone showed signs of their sleepless night, their fears deepened by exhaustion and shadow. Yet they stood straighter now, strengthened by Ivan's words. The weaver appeared at her side like a shadow taking form. Watch him carefully, he whispered. See how leadership grows from caring deeply. He nodded toward Ivan's left hand, which clenched and unclenched as he spoke. Notice his hand, the way his fingers curl when he mentions protection. There's an old story written in that gesture. Elora looked more closely and saw what the weaver meant. The slight tremor in Ivan's fingers, the protective way he curled inward. Memory struck her like lightning. The terrible wolf attack years ago that no one discussed, when Ivan had tried to help his father fight off the pack. She remembered Ivan's tears, the deep scar that still marked his arm, and his father's pale face against the white pillow. So still and peaceful at the end. The entire village had gathered to say goodbye, their hushed voices carrying stories of his bravery. Some wounds, Elora knew, ran deeper than scars, turning grief into a burning desire for revenge. In Ivan's eyes, she could still see that desperate day reflected, every wolf snarl, every moment of helplessness. All villagers understood the true danger of wolves. But for Ivan, they had stolen more than just his father. He's not just standing up for the village, she realized. He's standing up to every beast, every fear he's carried since that day. The wind rose suddenly, howling between the buildings like a living thing. Dark clouds rolled in from the sea and, being blocked by the hills, roiled overhead, bringing with them darkness deep as twilight. The first lightning bolt split the sky with blinding brilliance, followed instantly by thunder that shook the ground beneath their feet. "The storm!" someone cried. "Look at those clouds!" The second lightning flash illuminated something massive moving within the thunderheads. A shadow darker than the clouds themselves, its edges undefined, yet somehow vast. The entire crowd gasped, pointing upward as thunder rolled across them. "It's here!" The cry was nearly lost in the wind, and the imagination of the night's drinks became their reality. "The monsters come for us!" Panic erupted as the first huge raindrops fell. People began running for shelter as the storm broke over them with frightening intensity. But Ivan's voice rose above the chaos, steady as a lighthouse in the gale. "To the meeting hall!" he shouted. "Stay together. Help those who need it." He began directing people, pointing out the safest routes through the wind-whipped square. When Mrs. Petrovna stumbled, Ivan was there instantly, helping her up the steps. Even Ivan could see that they could not venture out into the storm. The storm raged for hours, increasing in fury with terrifying force. Rain fell in sheets, lightning turned the night to day. Yet through it all, Ivan kept working, organizing the shelter, calming fears, turning chaos into order. In that moment, Elora saw him clearly. Not just her childhood friend, but a growing leader. His impatience of the previous day was slowly being replaced with the responsibility of his character. In the early afternoon, when the worst of the storm had passed, Ivan gathered the village elders. "We'll organize a proper search at first light tomorrow," he announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned it. "We need clear skies and steady hands to face whatever's out there. Tonight, we must stay safe." The weaver touched Elora's shoulder gently. "You have until dawn to find the truth they need. Will you be ready?" Elora looked at the lightning-torn sky, then back to Ivan, who carried himself now with new purpose. She thought of her father's words about gentle hearts and fierce things, and knew her answer. "Yes," she said, "I'm ready."